Welcome to Thoughtful Planning, the place where real conversation, expert insight, and a touch of humor meet to turn our end-of-life uncertainties into self-assurance. I'm your co-host Santiago, a history buff and a big kid at heart.
And I'm Honey, your guide through the intricate dance of planning with care and a whole lot of warmth. Every week, we're here to turn those intimidating "are we ready" moments into confident "everything is under control" moments. Today's journey is one you won't want to miss. Hi, welcome to Thoughtful Planning. I'm Honey.
And I'm Santiago. Before we begin, please note that we're not doctors, lawyers, or funeral professionals. At least we're not. Our guest is. The shared information in this episode is for educational purposes, and it really highlights the guidelines for Texas residents. Always consult qualified professionals for decisions related to your specific situation in your area that you live in.
Today we have Genaro Reyes with us from Compassion Funeral Home in San Antonio, Texas. Genaro is here to guide us through what's involved in planning a home funeral, including the timeline, legal requirements, and how families can connect with a funeral home after the home funeral is complete. Genaro, welcome to the show.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
Well, welcome. It's really a pleasure to have you with us. It seems like we were just at your place not too long ago. So
Correct.
before we get started with our talk, for our audience, let's start with our essential question: what is a home funeral, and how does it differ from a service at a funeral home?
All right. So to begin, Genaro, can you walk us through what a home funeral involves and the key considerations families should keep in mind?
Okay. So a home funeral is just basically that, where you can have your loved one at home. So, it used to be like that back in the day before embalming was introduced. But definitely, it's taking care of your loved one beyond, their life. So at the time of death, it's basically that, where you would continue to tend to your loved one, where you would bathe them, dress them, shroud them, and even have the wake there at the home. So it's a continuation of caring for your loved one at home.
When you say shroud them, because maybe some people don't know what that means.
Okay. So shrouding is basically wrapping them in some kind of material. It's usually cotton or linen, and of course we shroud the loved one after bathing, so where they can be somewhat cocooned into this fabric, where they can stay clean, where they can stay in place, uh, for the wake part, and also for the transportation, and eventually for the burial.
Wow, I mean, that sounds like, a real traditional burial is what it sounds like to me. Like what you think about what they did like centuries ago, maybe,
Mhm.
and a little bit different than we do today. So, go ahead. You can say
Well,
something.
I was just going to say, some people still do it
Yeah,
that
I
way.
think it's
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah.
Yeah, so just to kind of focus on that word that you mentioned, Santiago, traditional.
Yeah,
That's the true traditional service. Because
yeah.
nowadays is what's called traditional is really conventional. So yes, that was like right on the bullseye. It is a traditional way of doing things, and that's what we're trying to kind of emphasize. We're trying to encourage it, so we can go back to that and just participate, be part of it.
It just seems like today with burials, there's so many legal hoops that you have to get through. So talking about those legal stuff. So what are the key legal requirements for holding a home funeral in Texas? And are there any specific permits or documents that a family has to prepare before the home funeral?
So yeah, so it most people think that there is a lot, like you mentioned just now, but there really isn't. Um, it's something fairly simple. It's something that could be guided by the funeral director, by the funeral home staff, and it's really a simple process. You just have to have that one or the individuals that are willing to participate, walk you through it, hold your hand basically through the process, and just be part of it. So it's fairly simple, really.
I'm still I'm wrapped around the shrouding because it seems it's like it's a more personal and a more intimate way to say goodbye when you're preparing the body yourselves instead of going in and getting somebody to embalm you and dress you in a suit, put the makeup on, and all that other stuff. It just seems like there's a lot more caring. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I think that
Mhm.
there's a lot of you saying goodbye in a different way than most people do today.
Yeah, so kind of like what you said, you wrapped into the shrouding part, right? So yeah, literally. Yeah,
Mm.
so just like you mentioned, all the answers are within us, and we just have to slow down, step back, and just kind of, participate and be part, and just kind of um, do exactly what we're feeling. That putting people in the suits, putting people in like all this makeup and things like that, that's really just us trying to hold on to something that perhaps we think it should be, but it doesn't have to be. The individual is transitioning from life to death, uh, and perhaps beyond. So it's just kind of taking care of that loved one, and then just it's still a human. It's still your loved one is still part of your family, regardless whether if it's blood or not. Um, and it's just part of that final journey to the resting place.
Um, so when I was taking doula classes, um, we talked about the home funerals, and we also talked about where you talk to the person. So like I would tell my husband like what my wishes are in
Mhm.
that I would like a home funeral or whatever my desire would be. Um, but in the doula class, they gave us this visual planning guide to fill out um, to kind of help the family know, like, okay, well, maybe we'll have some candles in the room. Maybe um, maybe I want to be in a certain room in the house with certain things or specific people to come by, like all of like the things that I would want for per se.
Yeah.
Um, is that what you see? Like a lot of people are planning ahead of time in the cases that you've done.
Some do and some don't. Just like in every industry, just like in every celebration. Um, and then as individuals, some of us are planners, but some of us are like spur of the moment kind of thing. Um, we're really driven by emotion, so it just really depends where we are at that time emotionally. So if and some of us have the time to plan, where they tell us your loved one has terminal illness or you have terminal illness, so then you start preparing. But when it's accidental, when it's just kind of unattended, well, then there's no time. But it just goes hand in hand. We're born, we're gonna die. So it's no surprise. It's gonna happen. It's a matter
Right.
of when. So really it's my responsibility as an individual to prepare for it and to line my personal things up, to write it down, to prepay, and just to have it there regardless of when it's going to happen, not if but when. So yeah, it's really my responsibility as an individual to get it done. um Now, as far as candles, as far as which side of the room, as far as all that,
Mhm.
it's just very personal, and we should consider it. We should listen to ourselves, and we should express those wishes, um, and it'll be a lot easier for the family. The family is really going to support that. They're really going to want to participate and just kind of make oneself feel more comfortable.
Um, for part of that, is there a, because when they're at home, like, well, first of all, how many days can they be at home before they need to go to be buried?
Yeah, so once a death occurs, really, we can leave an individual as long as we take the precautions, the refrigeration part of it, or just some kind of preservation with some dry ice or some cooling blankets kind of thing. I mean, we could really do 12, 24 hours or so, more or less. And that's usually enough for families to be able to do the bathing, do the shrouding or the dressing, have some hours of visitation or wake, and then just decide whether if it's going to be burial or cremation, and definitely with the guidance of the funeral director. So the state really wants you to report the death. So that's where we come in. That's where the professionals and licensed individuals here in Texas. That's where we come in, so we can report the death, so we can get the burial transit permit, so we can get the report of death printed out, so we can file for a death certificate.
So we talked about the 12 to 24 hours. So at what point beforehand should families think about, because you said it's an individual responsibility, what parts should we get that funeral home involved in the process to help us with our planning? And how do you uh, at Compassionate Funeral Home typically assist a family when they're planning and they know that they're going to do this when they're planning their home funeral? So when do you get involved?
All right. So definitely, as soon as I get the call, that's when I start. That's when I start talking to them. That's when I start asking really what their wishes are. And families, a lot of times they already know. They just don't know whether if it's legal or not. They just don't know whether they're allowed to or if they should. So a lot of us, like I mentioned before, we already feel and what we would like. So when I get the call, I listen to the individuals, and then I just guide them. And I really tell them it's a celebration of your loved one or yourself. So I'm really just there to do the documentation. Other than that, I'm gonna encourage and I'm gonna participate as much as they want me to, or I'm gonna step back as well. So we're give them the freedom to do what they wish to do, as long as I take custody of the individual, um, and then I file the documentation, and we're in communication. We're coordinating together. It's like this is what we wish, and we'll be in communication. So we'll go ahead and be part of it and definitely support it. So that's really when I get involved. Is when I get that phone call, when I get those questions asked, and um, and I'm really part of the process all the way to the rest of
How many home funerals have you done?
it. Here in San Antonio, it's maybe been around 11 or so. We've done quite a bit around Austin, Round Rock area, a lot more.
Wow.
So it just really depends on the location of the community that enjoys and knows that they can
So if I'm planning, is there anything that I could do to make your job easier and my spouse's job easier? So if I say this is what I want, and is there any information that you've ever gone and said I wish I had this beforehand? Is there anything that we or our listeners could prepare for if they choose to do a home funeral?
do. Yeah, so definitely yes. It's just like any celebration. Um, we like to go. We encourage you to visit the location. We encourage people to meet the funeral directors, the staff. Um, that's really step number one. We all know as soon as we see a place, we walk into a place, we can feel the energy, we will know if this is the place or not. And if it's not, then might as well just stop right there, and then keep searching for that place where you're gonna feel comfortable, where you're gonna be treated the way you like to be treated, um, and definitely the price. So that would be another one. My focus really as a funeral director and funeral home owner has been for really the focus is on smart shoppers. It's really for those individuals that want to get treated with respect, get treated professionally, but also with a fair price. It's really not gonna be like gouging really like super high prices or anything like that, um, or super low because the service is cheap kind of thing. So it's really gauged for the smart shop. Just because as an individual, I like to be treated good, but I still like to save money. So that's definitely what the mission is.
Right.
We've talked about that a couple times on our podcast about that, about saving money part.
Well,
Right.
so when you talk about saving money, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, a home funeral is definitely going to save people money, right? I mean, because they're doing it themselves for the most part. And then, well, you're there. Okay. You're there if I need you.
Right.
Um, Obviously, there's a fee for that, but that, the home funeral fee is it less or is it actually more? Actually, now that I'm talking about it.
So there's this fee that's called a professional service fee,
Okay.
where the overhead of the funeral home, that's where it comes from. So every funeral home is gonna charge that professional service fee. Okay, it varies per location, but then after that, everything else is really the merchandise, the facility, and then the labor that's gonna be done. So after that professional service fee, you would have embalming. So in a home funeral, we don't do embalming, so there's no need for that. There's gonna be the bathing of the individual. Well, families are doing it at home, so there won't be that.
Wait, hold on. If
Mhm.
I need help with that, like, I don't know, that sounds, what is involved with bathing?
All right, so it's really just the willingness to participate first of all.
Right.
So when you decide that there's going to be a home funeral, well, there's already willingness. So when there's willingness, it's possible.
Okay.
So there could be guidance from either the doulas, from the hospice nurses, or ourselves, the funeral home staff as well. Um, but it's already within us. It's already within you. You're gonna know what to do.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it's just what it is. You want to prepare the area for obviously the fluids. You want to have um, a solution, some kind of water, some soaps, some oil, some towels. So you're gonna be cleansing. You don't want to cross contaminate your other items as well. So there's gonna be a little bit of that, and then anointment. There's gonna be all of that, the drying part, and then the securing, um, really the body itself. So yes, if you happen to need assistance, then yes, we would definitely step in and assist. Yes.
Mhm.
After all that, there's gonna be the dressing. So once again, you'll be doing that, and if you need assistance, yes, you will get that as well. So other than the transportation from the place of death to the resting place, whether if it's going to be the crematory or if it's going to be the cemetery, well then that would be the next fee would be the transportation, and then another fee would be the container. So if you don't have your own shroud, if you're going to purchase a shroud, if you're going to want like a wicker basket, something like that, well then that's a merchandise now. So then there will be a fee for that. As far as the facility where the visitation, the wake, or the service is held, well, then it's at home, so there's no fee for that.
Mhm.
Um, so at the end, yes, you will be saving all of that money because it's not being utilized.
Hmm. How much is a wicker basket?
So they vary in prices because they also vary in the actual structure of it. There's bamboo. Uh, there's just kind of like a four corner. There's a six corner. So it really depends, but they range between maybe 1400 to around 3500 or so. It depends on the finish of it.
We saw the one when we visited your funeral home,
Hmm.
and I was like, "That is really cool." I'd never seen that before, and I was like,
Yeah.
"That's really cool," and it's biodegradable and, and all that good stuff, so it
Um,
it wouldn't be a burden on the
on the
Hmm.
budget.
environment
You know.
or the budget. I'm thinking about environment,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but,
Environment for sure.
and it's getting back to what we were talking about, a more true
Tradition.
So
traditional
no. Yeah.
burial.
Can someone be buried in just the shroud? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you
And
don't
we've
even
done
need the basket.
correct. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We have buried many loved ones in just a shroud. Yeah, and they're beautiful services. Um,
Mhm.
Once I found out about natural burials, um, me as a field director and really embalmer, I decided that that's the way I would like to be buried. And it's in a
Yeah.
shroud and it's in a natural way, for sure.
Is there any reason why someone wouldn't be able to be buried naturally?
The true natural burial would be no embalming and in a biodegradable container. Um, and
Oh,
it would be the depth. It's shallower. So the only reason that somebody couldn't be like a true natural burial would be if perhaps they passed away out of state or out of the country, and they get embalmed there and then shipped home. So that would be one of the ways that one couldn't because of the embalming.
okay. So speaking of that, now I have another question. um, they have to be embalmed when they're, or I guess it just depends on whatever the state law is. Like, could there be a bunch of maybe dry ice if they really didn't want to be embalmed?
Yeah, so it's possible, but it's just like jumping hurdles. It's really speaking a little bit of a foreign language right now, just because we're just so used to the conventional way, to where it's like the embalming, the metal caskets, the seal this and seal that, triple layer this. That it's just when you speak like natural dry ice and some kind of a refrigerated sealed container, everybody's like, "Whoa, we don't know," so they just say no, it's not allowed because they really don't know. So once again, I go back to willing. If somebody's willing to, then we're gonna find a way. So, but it's gonna be challenging.
Right.
So, earlier you were talking about transportation of the deceased. How was that managed after the home funeral? And then once we decide, this is where we want to go, how is that handled by your funeral home, for example?
Okay, so the transportation happens in our vehicle, either our call car or the hearse.
Hmm.
So it just really depends where we're going, how far, and what needs to be done, what's available per se. Um, but really, the transportation as well is just one of those that families can transport their own loved ones too.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, but the industry doesn't want you to know that because, of course, the money is where the more we do is the more we can charge.
Just
Wait,
throw me in the trunk, babe.
how would they transport them or move
And
them?
there's different ways we can just use the equipment. We can use the containers. We can load them really, as long as the individuals as safe as possible. As long as the family is willing, once again willing to do it, kind of thing. It's legal. So it's also possible. So it just comes down to that, to the willingness of it.
Would they need I guess like the death certificate from you before they could transport
So,
them in
so
the
we
car?
would we would do the documentation. Yeah, we would definitely do the burial
Oh,
transit
okay.
permit, report of death, and file the death certificate.
Hmm.
Everything's changed, and just mainly because of liability lawsuits, things like that. So that's why everybody just kind of gets scared with things like that. But if the family
Right.
is willing and they're taking responsibility for their loved one, then and they have communication with the funeral home, funeral director. Then,
Um, so you know how you mentioned you've done about 11 of the home funerals here in San Antonio. Um, have you ever experienced any kind of challenges with families with doing a home funeral?
it depends on their willingness and the experience really on getting involved with their loved ones. So a lot of families that want the home funerals because they have been there, they've been present through the illness, they've been caring for them, they've been changing them, giving them medication, feeding them. They've really been very involved, so they want to continue that and carry that over all the way through. So it's just really gonna come down to that willingness and the experience. So there are some that are like, no, I'd rather you do that, and sure, we can go ahead and then assist and do that. We all have that friend that is like, no, let's do it. We can do it. I can help you. Let's, kind of thing. So it's really, your circle, the circle of trust that you have around.
Are there any specific resources or organizations that families can turn to for guidance on home funerals? Not only here in Texas, but maybe a national organization, somewhere where anybody in the 50 states can access it for this guidance?
There is, and more people are just kind of returning to that traditional way. So with that and the access of all these resources, a lot more is it's coming up. And yes, there is books available, national. There's also other states that encourage this a lot more, so they're more familiar with it. They're more comfortable, and it's just possible that way. So yeah, a little by little, it's growing. Little by little, more and more people are wanting. They're really finding out that it's okay and that it is legal to do.
What advice would you give to families considering a home funeral but unsure about the process? Besides what you've already said, you've
Yeah.
shared a lot, but is there anything else you would advise them?
Well, first, I mean, definitely like everything, express it, ask, research, visit, meet, and the answers are gonna be coming in. So definitely do all that, and it's gonna come down to that participation with your loved one, and then just talking and just making them as comfortable and just helping them through that transition.
Have you ever done a mock home funeral service?
So we participate with the doulas and their graduation. And part of the ceremony is to do mock burials at Countryside in La Vernia at our
Okay.
natural cemetery with Sunny Markham and Christopher. So we do that. So part of the graduation ceremony with the International Doula Life Movement and other groups, we do a mock burial. So we do part of the graduation is to participate in a mock natural burial. So they get to bring plants, flowers, they get to decorate, they get to carry the loved one. Aunt Lulabelle is her name. And
Mm.
so they get to lower her into the grave, they get to express, different stories, things like that. So it's just kind of um, I heard a long time ago that if I see it, if I hear it, I forget. If I see it, I remember. If I do it, I understand. So that's
Mhm.
that's really what it comes down to. So once you participate in it, it's like, wow, like I want this for myself. So we're converting a lot of people back to the traditional
Um, Actually, because I graduated from International Doula Life Movement in
way.
December, but the weather was bad, so we didn't get to do the mock burial. So Anna said we could come with the next class that does it. to participate. So I'm looking forward to that because, like you just said, we have both seen one, um, but but yeah, that's our extent of like
Yeah,
of
one of our family members, his
grandmother
grandmother actually was buried in Livonia with us.
at
Yeah,
Countryside.
and that's the first time we'd ever been to it, and it was so different from the conventional,
Right.
Oh
and you're
yeah.
looking at it, you're like, wow, we didn't know that this could happen. And I think, isn't that the only funeral? I mean, the only place that you can be buried like that in the San Antonio area, or
Um,
is there more?
It's
like
it's very limited, but that is the one that I work with, and yeah, I would imagine that maybe little by little others are gonna start joining in the movement per se. But like I said, it's just kind of it's just now coming um, to a happening. So just like other states are more involved into it, Texas is just kind of conservative and then just kind of wanting more of the conventional
mhm.
Yeah, so I think that people have to get out of the box and maybe jump in the basket and get wrapped into what we're talking about here. Holy smokes!
You got it.
Get think about this because this is different, but it's also getting back to our roots. No pun intended, but
way.
man, I'm hitting them all today, huh?
Doing good.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're on a roll.
but this has been so informative, and hopefully, our listeners learned a lot because we've learned more than what we knew coming into this. Thank you so much for being with us today. All right.
So they can find out more about this information at here with me at Compassion Funeral Home.
Yeah.
My name's Genaro Reyes, and I'm available to answer questions. I'm available to meet. I'm available to talk about it and pre-plan it, and you know have the availability to so people can pre-arrange and start paying for it. My phone number is 210-772-7074, or I can receive email at compassionfuneral@gmail.com. The word compassion, COMPASSION, the word funeral, FUNERAL, @gmail.com.
Any social media?
Yes, so the classic Facebook. So we're on there as Compassion Funeral Home. Uh, Also, my personal account, Genaro Reyes Jr.
Oh,
Uh, and that's the platform that we focus on the most, just because of the audience. It's the more mature, the older individuals,
I think
and
he
those
just called me
are.
old.
I know. Me
I
too.
said old. I said older, and I said.
No, I think it's great. I really admire what you're doing because
Mhm.
we sometimes forget where we've come from, and we got to remember that sometimes.
So we
Yeah.
get so wrapped up on selecting plastic or paper at the store. We get so wrapped up in separating the plastics and the metals and composting the fruit and vegetable leftovers. But when it comes down to our own bodies, we end up embalming and putting ourselves in a metal casket in a triple layer, outer burial container per se. So it's like where it really counts is composting oneself, returning back to Mother Earth, and then so it's really where it counts.
What you just said.
Right.
I mean, because if you think about if you want to be natural and you want to be respectful of the earth, why are we putting poison into our bodies, throwing ourselves in a metal box surrounded by concrete? Makes no sense.
Right.
Oh, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, let's revisit the essential question. What is a home funeral and how does it differ from a traditional?
A
or conventional
conventional
funeral
yes.
service.
Right.
So, again, thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. And we hope for our audience that this conversation has inspired you to explore the next step in your planning process. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and please share this episode with anyone that you think might find it helpful. So, until next time, remember, every chapter you write today shapes your legacy tomorrow. Thank you for joining us at Thoughtful Planning.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, thank you.
And just like the vibrant hues of a setting sun, we're wrapping up another episode of Thoughtful Planning. Every shared story and insight is a step closer to turning uncertainty into celebrations of preparedness.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, remember that every surprise that comes our way is an opportunity to grow, adapt, and learn. Stay tuned for more stories, expert insight, and of course, a touch of wit in our next episode.
We're not just co-hosts, we're fellow travelers on this journey. For more information on additional resources, which will help you take the next step in planning, look for the link in the show notes for our membership. Join us next time for another episode of Thoughtful Planning. Until then, keep living, laughing, and loving every moment.